Hello and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. Today our guest is Roderich Kiesewetter. He is a deputy spokesperson at the Foreign Policy Committee of the German Parliament Bundestag. He is a retired colonel of the German Army and he was head of the Association of German Reservists in 2011-2017. Welcome, Roderich.
Hi, welcome, Sergej. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you that you have found time for this conversation. Your schedule is extremely busy recently with all your calls for support of Ukraine and your activity. Thank you for doing this. But the first question I wanted to ask you, you have said recently that Germany must allow Ukraine to hit Russian targets in Russia with the German-provided weapons. And that was also the topic, obviously, of conversation between the French President Macron and our Chancellor Scholz recently. What is going on there with Chancellor Scholz? Did he give the permission to hit Russian territory or did he not?
Unfortunately not. He did not give the permission. But he has to withstand a change of paradigm in the countries around Germany. So the Polish foreign minister, President Macron from France, but also Sweden, the Baltic states and some others are supporting that Ukraine can hit also targets on the Russian ground. Even our defense minister already in April last year said it is so normal that the attacked country is able and must be able to defend itself and to carry the war on the territory of the aggressor. But it is the Chancellor of Germany who is hampering that. And he has no juridical reason. His only reason is self-deterrence and the belief that he would escalate if he gave the permission to Ukraine to use weapons which they received from Germany. So the first remark I would like to do is it is completely on a legal basis, but it is not explicable. We have no explanation why our Chancellor is ruling out a very self-explaining necessity where Ukraine gets the permission to prepare attacks also against Russian forces in their staging areas, for example, or to destroy their supply chains on the Russian ground.
In Germany, the decision about the foreign policy and like if we send troops somewhere or if we send weapons, it is being taken by the parliament, if I'm not mistaken. And the parliament has not limited Ukraine's scale of usage of these weapons. Am I correct?
In a certain condition, yes. However, the rule of the German or the strength of the German parliament is only related to the employment of German forces. In regard to the ability of Ukraine to use foreign weapons or handed over weapons, it is up to the Chancellor. He is giving the guidelines due to our constitution. But when our constitution was written, nobody thought that the Chancellor would be so limited in this context. Our parliament several times has encouraged our Chancellor, our government, to do more for Ukraine, not only to deliver heavy weapons, but also to allow that Ukraine must act or is able to act with the handed over weapons in their own strategy, in their own ideas. But the Chancellor is in a kind of self-deterrence and probably also in the belief that if he gave the permission, Russia would further escalate. But in all the time when he did not give the permission, for example, to hand over tanks, to hand over infantry fighting vehicles, or even artillery shells, Russia increased its escalation. So it was never gratified from the Russian side when Germany was reluctant. In the contrary, it was an encouragement for Putin to even escalate the more, the less Germany was willing to support Ukraine.
What can be the reason behind such repeatedly false assessment by Chancellor Scholz. In a normal situation, when a person does something many times and doesn't come to the result which the person desires, the person changes their behavior, but Scholz doesn't.
Well, there are at least 2 or 3 explanations, but only he knows what really is true. First of all, he defines peace as an armistice, whereas the whole German society is defining peace as a good within freedom and self-determination. So there is no peace without freedom, security, and self-determination. And the definition via an armistice is not taking into account that Russia has, after Minsk I and Minsk II, exploited these armistices with rape, with the detainment of children, with ugly violence against the civil society. The second explanation is that he believes it's much better to have a Russia with Putin than a Russia without Putin. Some months ago, he told me upon a question that Crimea has a symbolic meaning for Putin and that he has to calculate with, and who wants to free Crimea should do this without German participation. My question was, why don't you help to free Crimea, because Crimea is the center of gravity of Putin. If Crimea falls, then also Putin is endangered. And his answer shows me that he trusts more in a Russia with Putin than in a Ukraine within its legal territory. And the third is, we are not knowing how his relation to Russia was before he became Chancellor. We know the Wirecard scandal, which was a Russian secret service operation against the German financial market. We know that there was something wrong in Hamburg when he was the mayor of Hamburg as regards the whole topic of cum-ex. This is a tax, how should I say it? Some enterprises exploited our tax system and got 2 times revenues on non-made investments. So this was really tricky, and he knew about it. And we don't know whether there are any compromises from the Russian side. And there are also some other topics which we would like to see in an investigation committee, but this takes time.
And this is exactly what is happening now in front of the upcoming European Parliament elections. We will have elections on the 9th of June, and the Social Democratic Party by Chancellor Scholz presents itself as a peace party, as a party which prevents a global war. Is it a part of some sort of cynical calculation and calculated campaign? What is going on in Social Democratic foreign and security policy towards Ukraine?
Well, an excellent question. There is a partition inside the Social Democratic parties. Those who are very transatlantist, they left the party, or they left the parliament, or they have decided to leave the parliament or the government, like Thomas Hitzler, Undersecretary of State, like Michael Roth, Chairman of the Committee of Foreign Affairs, like Eva Högel, now responsible for the army, for contracts and so on. And for example, also Fritz Felgentreu, who was really a convinced transatlantist. So those who are centrists in the Social Democratic Party left the political stage, which means that the Social Democratic Party turns to the left. But all his rhetoric is completely wrong. 2 proofs. First of all, our Defense Minister Pistorius is pledging for an armed forces Bundeswehr which is able for war, kriegstüchtig, fit for war. This does not fit to this peace sounds of the Chancellor. And second, the head of the Spitzenkandidat, the head of the movement for the Social Democratic Party, of the Social Democratic Party for the European Parliament, Mrs. Barley, plead for a European nuclear bomb. And everybody said, what's that? We have the nuclear sharing with the United States. We don't need a warmongering consideration about European nuclear weapons. Can't afford it. We cannot afford it. So the issue is, it is not credible. There is no unanimous position, and the definition of this peace the Chancellor is desiring or designing is only peace as a kind of armistice, and not peace in freedom and self-determination. So it's wrong and ill-advised rhetoric, and we have to be very careful. His target group are the voters for the AfD and the alliance of Sarah Wagenknecht. Both are very parties which are very close to Russia. The AfD is very right-wing, and the alliance Sarah Wagenknecht, BSW, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, is very close to Putin and very left, nearly a communist party. So he tries to convince people who support these parties to vote the SPD. So he is fishing in a basin of really raptors, raptors of our democracy.
And that, of course, sounds very dangerous. But at the same time, Chancellor constantly repeats that Germany remains the largest supporter, the biggest supporter of Ukraine, and we cannot afford more.
Yes, Sergei, this is the most bitter, and I believe also the biggest fake news, the most bitter frame, a falsification. Germany has delivered military aid since March this year, or even April, of about 7 billion euros. Military aid, weapons, ammunition, and so on. But the Chancellor is promulgating that Germany has delivered already weapons for 28 billion euros. These all are allocations. And these allocations are not yet ordered in the armaments industry. They are not even produced. These are announcements until the early 30s, when probably Ukraine will not exist if all other countries think the German way. So indeed, only 7 billion euros and in the value of weapons were delivered. And 72%, let's say 70%, of the German aid for Ukraine is social welfare for Ukrainian refugees in Germany. They get the same money as people who are not able to work, not the unemployment, but those who are in a social network which is called Bürgergeld, citizen money, which is really a kind of income. It's more than you get when you are unemployed. So 23 to 24 billion euros were already invested in the citizens' money for Ukrainian refugees in Germany. 7 billion money were invested in military aid, so these are 30 billion euros, and another 5 billion euros civilian aid in Ukraine. So 35 billion euros, this sounds a lot. This is the second largest supporter, yes. But in military means 7 billion euros, we are on the same level than France, than United Kingdom. And even worse, compared to our GDP, we are on place 15 or 16 of the European countries supporting Ukraine. And other countries like Norway, 1.7% of the GDP, Estonia or Lithuania, 2.3 to 2.5% of the GDP, Germany, less than 0.5%, I believe about 0.3 to 0.4% military aid compared to our GDP. So the narrative or the rhetoric that other countries should step in because Germany has done so much is really ill-advised and is also humiliating the European neighbor countries who have done much more compared to the German economic power. And this is isolating us, and this will damage also our reputation after the war. Already in the armaments industry, there is a trademark, and this trademark is named German Free. because a decision of the German Security Council to hand over weapons or give the permission for armaments export is already has to be included with a share, with an export share of 5%. So if a Canadian enterprise uses German tools or German hardware with a share of 5%, they have to wait for the decision of the German Security Council. And this takes sometimes a year. So they say it's better to have German-free production lines, so German-free supply chains. And I believe if Germany is pursuing this ill-advised way of the Chancellor, there will also be a German-free recovery of Ukraine, because they will not give us the chance to earn money when we have wasted, or while we have wasted, Ukrainian lives and Ukrainian perspectives.
That is a scary perspective indeed. But what can be the options now? What options are on the table? What should we do to support Ukraine fastly and decisively?
The Chancellor should follow the vast majority of our parliament, and he should smithen an alliance of European countries, a coalition of the willing, who are willing and able to defend the airspace of Ukraine on the basis of the UN Charter. So it's not a NATO involvement, it's an involvement of nations who are part of the rule-based international order, to deliver everything which is necessary for the victory of Ukraine in the borders of 91. Second, to destroy Russian unmanned and manned air vehicles by Western air defense, also from Western territory over the Ukrainian airspace. And third, not to draw us red lines, but to make clear to Putin that he has to accept the right of existence of all of the Russian neighbor states. And it is not to defeat Russia, but it's Russia to learn to lose by accepting the right of existence of all neighbor states to Russia. This, I believe, is very important, because Putin is questioning the cohesion of NATO, and Putin is demanding that the Baltic states leave NATO and EU because they, in his view, are a genuine part of the Russian Federation. And also Moldova should stop its idea to become a member of the European Union. They should be included in the Russian territory. So we have some demands: withdrawal of Russian troops from Transnistria and Georgia, and withdrawal from Russian nuclear weapons from Kaliningrad. And then to accept the right of existence not only of the member states, but also the withdrawal from Ukraine. This is Zelensky's peace plan. An international statute for Crimea, as long as it takes that the Ukrainian citizens have the chance to return into their home ground on Crimea, because millions of them had to leave, had to flee. They became displaced persons since 2014. And to pay reparations, and to give an investigation court, a war crime court, leeway for all the horrible war crimes Russia has committed, starting with Bucha, Irpin and Mariupol. At the end, Ukraine needs security guarantees. Why? Ukraine has received security guarantees in 1994. And we saw the proof in 2014 they were worth nothing. So the best security guarantee is a NATO membership. If somebody wants to freeze the conflict, he also must be willing to send 100,000 of troops. We speak about 300 to 500,000 troops. And those Germans who are promulgating that, like the caucus leader of the Social Democratic Party, Mützenich, who want to freeze the conflict, they do not agree to send troops for safeguarding Ukraine. So they sacrifice Ukraine. And we should avoid that Ukraine becomes a role model for Serbia against Kosovo or Bosnia-Herzegovina, or Iran against Iraq, or China against Taiwan. And when I mention Iran, Russia is in a very dangerous coalition with China, Iran, and North Korea. And these four countries, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, three of them are nuclear powers. And the Iran is on a way to become a nuclear power. And he doesn't want to share the fate of Ukraine. So they will become a nuclear power. They will not accept security guarantees. They will not trust in them. So we have to be very clear that the fate of Ukraine brings Iran to a nuclear power. And this is the reason why, not only for humanitarian reasons, but also for security political reasons, Ukraine must not fail. It must not serve as a role model for rogue states. It must serve for the rule of law and not for the right of might.
And do you think that before Ukraine joins NATO, that Western troops can be stationed on the territory of Ukraine, like Estonia or France or other nations mentioned? Is it a realistic move?
Well, it is feasible. It's according to the law. In Germany, we have to be careful by using the word ground troops or boots on the ground, because people think these are combat troops. My proposal is also for Germany, but to support a coalition of the willing on the basis of the Charter of United Nations, to at least send medical troops, for example, for field hospitals, engineer troops for demining, for example, agricultural areas, logistic troops for the transportation, for example, of military goods or wounded soldiers, and fourth, to send electronic warfare troops for signal warfare as well. And all other countries who want to send ground troops for combat support or for combat assistance in any other way, they should feel free. It's legal on the base of the Charter of the United Nations. But the smallest common denominator should be medical troops, engineer troops, and the logistics and maintenance.
Does this idea find support among the German society? There are a lot of fears within the German society of being directly involved in this war. You have mentioned already to stress that it is important to stress that it will be no combat troops, but support troops like non-fighting units. But still, this can fire back within the German society.
Well, the German society, due to re-education in the 50s and 60s, is a very pacifist society. They believe that they can finance this war out of the suit pocket and that they could follow the war from the home office. But still 60% of the German population believe that we are doing not enough or just enough for Ukraine. Only 32% of the German population are believing that we are doing too much for Ukraine or should not do anything for Ukraine. So we have nearly two-thirds, despite that we have a chancellor who is not giving orientation, who see the necessity to support Ukraine. Nevertheless, there are some German media who are only giving free micros to those who are against the participation. And we have in the eastern countries, in eastern Germany, some who have a very romantic view on Russia. They see Russia as a kind of Soviet Union. They remember Gorbachev, but they do not remember that Gorbachev killed 14 members of parliament in Lithuania in 1991. And they did forget that Putin asked with a rifle with a pistol to the police chief of Dresden in 1989 to start his police troops to shoot against a demonstration. So people do not see the ugly side, the terrorist side, the brutal side of Putin, and they believe that if the war, and they believe that this is only a war between Russia and Ukraine. They do not see that this is a war against our way of life. And this is a failure to our education system in Eastern Germany, but it's also a failure to the media, who are not willing to explain what is really at stake. peace and freedom and self-determination. But I must underline, that's less than a third of the German population. Nearly two-thirds are for more support or for this support what we have just now. And if you gave more information and explained the horrible alternatives, mass flight, failure of Ukraine, a blueprint for other countries, strengthening the right of might, people would see that they chose better the freedom.
Are we in Europe and in NATO ready to a possible fight against Russia? We know that the Kremlin has never abandoned its plans of confrontation against NATO. We know that there are sabotage acts on our territory which can be attributed to Russia with a very high probability, very high chance. Are our military policies, are our military plans already adjusted to such a war, and are we economically, technically, and psychologically ready for this confrontation?
Sergej, excellent question. First of all, the best promulgator for a stronger European endeavor, also in view of the shift of burden from the United States to Europe, is the Secretary General of NATO. Since 2 years, he's demanding from the European NATO member states to enhance and expand their expenditures for the armaments industry and to make their armaments industry run. It's Germany which is hampering that. Second, the capacities are available. Third, also the plans are finalized, really excellent plans. But the psychological side is not prepared. And people believe to conduct this war out of the West pocket, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal, but not in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in the Baltic states, in the Scandinavian states, in Bulgaria and Romania. They know what is at stake. So we have to listen much more carefully to our Eastern friends. And Germany is missing its hinge function, the function to address the security needs from the eastern flank to the southern flank. It's France which is taking over this idea, and it's the French president who has made it very clear this week in Germany during his state visit what is at stake. And he met a chancellor who was emotional, cold, who was cold-hearted, who was not accepting the needs of Ukraine and to invest more in our freedom. I believe there is a split in Europe. And let me also bring in the idea of burden sharing, which will be replaced in autumn or in January by the US with burden shifting, also in the Biden 2 area. 330 million US citizens do not see why they should finance a war where 500 million Europeans are not ready to do more. In 1941 to 1945, more than 400,000 US soldiers and Canadian soldiers lost their lives because the European states were not able to contain or stop the German terror. They were not able to stop the war against Germany, so they needed the American investment, and 400,000 Americans lost their lives. They will not do this again. And I just came back 3 weeks ago from the United States. They told me, if you took the situation serious in Ukraine, you would invest more and not wait for us Americans. Why don't you do more? It's a war on your ground. It's your security which is in danger. And therefore, we have to do even much more. Our Chancellor came back in February from the United States and he said, if the United States does not step in, we Europeans can't. 3 ugly messages. One to Putin, you can rely on us, we are not doing anything, so you can continue your horrible war. A message to Ukraine: we are not reliable partners, you have to wait for America. And a message to the United States: it is support for the Trumpists. Well, we Europeans, we encourage you to do more, but we are not willing to help Ukraine. It's not our war. And therefore, we really have to have a change of paradigm in Germany and to encourage our neighbor states. And that's what I meant some minutes ago. I plea for an alliance of countries with the German, French, and Polish leadership to establish a coalition of the willing to safeguard the Ukrainian airspace, to destroy any attack on Ukraine, also on Russian soil, and to encourage Ukraine to continue this war and give them the perspective of EU membership and NATO membership in a very close future.
And these are all very logical and clear arguments, but we know how Russia addresses them, also using their network of influence agents and assets in Europe. We know that recently in the European Parliament, offices of several deputies have been searched, and probably they can be linked to Russia's influence network, spreading false information and Russian narratives. We know that Russians are very good in sabotage actions, and that is what we experience now. Like every time when you raise your voice and say we need to do more in Ukraine for Ukraine, the Russian assets reply, "Oh, that will be terrible. It will be a global war. You don't want to have a global war. That's why don't do it." Do you feel that this Russian influence increases now, or the Western intelligence agencies from Estonia to France do now more to uncover these networks?
Yes, what we see is really a long-prepared, well-established Russian Secret Service operation. They have created with Voice of Europe and some others a network where a two-digit number, a higher two-digit number of Russian influencers or European influencers with a Russian background try to change the framework of European credibility and to influence with a huge amount of money every month the Russian disinformation campaign, with a Russian disinformation campaign to destroy a unanimous European conviction that we need peace and freedom, that we need a functional European Parliament, that we need a strong Commission controlled by the Parliament. So this is a very successful operation. And we are very grateful to an Eastern Secret Service who gave us these pieces of information. Our own German Secret Services are not allowed to control financial actions, financial transactions. So it's not within their purpose. So they are dependent from the knowledge of friendly services who give them the pieces of information. So even there, we have to enhance the capacities and also the operational permission of our secret services. But it is really a success of a combined European endeavor against this Russian influence, and by the way, also against the Chinese influence as well.
Indeed, and don't forget that also in the other regions which are bordering the European Union, like the Balkans, including Serbia, Chinese and Russian influence increases, including military influence and influence of intelligence agencies. So it is not only about Russia's war against Ukraine or Russia's sabotage operations in Europe. It is also about their influence in other bordering regions. We have talked to Roderich Kiesewetter, who is a deputy spokesperson at the Foreign Policy Committee at the German Parliament Bundestag. He is a retired colonel of the German Army Bundeswehr and was a head of Association of German Reservists in 2011 until 2016. Thank you so much for this very insightful scary partly, but very important interview, Roderich.
Thank you very much, Sergej. Thank you for your endeavor, and I'm ready to support anytime. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you so much, and don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel, and if you know in particular any person who needs to listen to this interview, feel free to send a link to this person and spread interview and these insights by Roderich Kiesewetter. Stay with Ukraine, stay strong, stay for freedom.